Good morning. I want to welcome everyone to this special meeting that we're having today for the Education and Neighborhoods Committee. I'm very pleased to be joined by my colleague Mitch O'Farrell. We have a few items of business we'd like to take care of today, so I want to defer to the clerk at this time and see if I can get you to read the first item that we'll be dealing with.
Good morning. The first item is motion Weston Krikorian relative to amending the council rules to allow sufficient time for representatives of neighborhood councils or neighborhood council alliances to address the city council, its committees, city commissions, and boards to present official views.
Okay, at this point, I think I have a card. May have two. Mr. Spindler and Mr. Bailey on item one. Please come forward. Good to see you.
Good morning, Mr. President, council member. Glenn Bailey. I am affiliated with several of the neighborhood council alliances. So on this matter regarding neighborhood councils being able to make presentations before city council, its committees and commissions, do know that this is a recommendation of the Plan Review Committee, of which I was one of the members. It's also the recommendation of the Valley Alliance of Neighborhood Councils, which represents 34 neighborhood councils in the city. And the reason this is important is because many issues, as you know, are rather controversial, and sometimes neighborhood councils can spend an hour or longer depending on the complexity of the issue, depending on the number of stakeholders that come to their meeting. And it's very difficult when they're given just 1 or 2 minutes to present that recommendation. And what I think would be very helpful in this process as you're developing the rules is what we see as neighborhood councils, being in the charter, being part of the city family, is being able to sit at the table as the other various departments are. For example, on a planning matter, you have transportation there, you may have police. There may be some dialogue and opportunity for questions about certain issues. And I think that's very helpful for that, be at the table in that you're not just giving the presentation, that maybe during the dialogue, you're there to answer clarifying questions, or maybe an amendment comes up. And so if that could be incorporated as part of that process, again, particularly planning matters, they're very detailed, as you know, and that is something that would allow neighborhood councils to represent their stakeholders best, in my opinion, because they're taking all that input that they got out in the community and they're bringing it here to City Hall. So I do support this with, if we can tweak it in that way. Thank you.
No, thank you. Mr. Spindler. Okay.
Yes, very good points. It's time to let the neighborhood council sit before you in those chairs ahead of me and be there whenever they desire to be there on these important matters. You have them sit here where I sit all the time, treated like third-class citizens. They're elected officials. They have as much right to be there and addressing the public as you do. And what you do is you treat them like members of the public. They come in here and they speak, and you give them 1 minute to speak. Like the other day, 1 minute. I'm from I don't care, 1 minute.
Have you read the motion, the bill? I mean, this is what the discussion is. It is my motion to talk about giving the neighborhood councils more time. So, I mean, what are you complaining about? If you think they should be given more time, that's what we're discussing today, Wayne. Makes sense when you talk.
When they go to these meetings, you don't let them approach the chair. You don't recognize them as elected officials. You just
read the motion.
The rest of the world, like you're turning my mic off all the time. You're turning everybody's mic off all the time. Why? The point is that these people have important issues. They're trying to get parking restrictions reduced. They can't be heard. You're not listening to them. Then Saturdays, they go to Temple and they get tickets. Sundays, there's no parking restrictions, but they can't come here on a committee meeting and in a general meeting and sit there in front of you and give their testimony. That's the problem. You need to be able to give these people the right to really represent their communities, and it's just crap. They don't get, they just have these meetings in their localities, and they get ignored by you. They need to be able to take their proper place at these meetings.
Okay, can I get the department to come forward? Oh, Mr. Bailey, are you being ignored on this issue? I mean, don't you think we're attempting to come up with a way to accommodate the neighborhood councils? I'm asking you a question. As the chair, I think I had leeway to do that. What is your opinion on what it is we're trying to do? I understand that this was a recommendation of some years ago, and now this committee is taking it seriously.
And I thank you for making the motion, and Councilmember Krikorian for seconding it. And like I said, I fully support it. It just, there are some details on how you work out how that process works.
I agree.
And it's not just the length of time, it's the ability to have some, dialogue at the appropriate time. Maybe not right at the beginning before the presentation unfolds and the commissioners or committee members make amendments. If the neighborhood councils were at the table, then they could even comment on the amendments and say, yes, our stakeholders, we discussed that and we feel that. And again, this is for official positions of the neighborhood council. This is not just something out of the blue air.
No.
This is something fully vetted and voted on by the full neighborhood council that this would apply to.
I appreciate you, Glenn, and he's absolutely correct. This is not, we wouldn't want a folk to come down and say, I'm with this neighborhood council, give me my 3 minutes, give me my 5 minutes, or whatever it is. We want to come up with a way where this is functional, where it makes sense, something that deals with community impact studies, paperwork, being submitted. So I want you to know, Gracie, that how serious this committee is about trying to do everything that we can to make the neighborhood councils function better. The people of this city decided that they wanted to create the neighborhood councils. I think it's our responsibility to help them to, be successful and to help you. So with that said, I'd like to get your thoughts.
Good morning, Council President Wesson and
Good morning.
Councilmember O'Farrell. Gracie Liu, General Manager for the Department of Neighbor Empowerment. The department is supportive of this motion and of the fact that the neighborhood councils and the alliances have repeatedly asked for additional time when they've taken an official position on a matter before City Council, because they are often don't have the ability to fully explain their position during public comment time. So we are very happy that this motion is before the committee, and are happy to assist in any way that we can to make sure that it goes through.
Well, I appreciate that. I think this is the first in a series of motions and recommendations that you will see come from this committee in a very short period of time. We are looking for action, and we're going to make sure that we move. Mr. O'Farrell, did you have any comments or anything that you'd like to say?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions. So we're talking about weaving in community impact statement as a justification for extending the comment time period. That's on the table, and also for official positions taken only. Sometimes, well, oftentimes, neighborhood councils would take an official position but not be part of a community impact statement. So that has to be looked at, and I look forward to on the report back to sorting out that piece of it. And then also, in terms of the actual moment when either a presentation is made or public comment is given, it'll need to be decided on what that format will be like. Will it be a group of neighborhood councils, if it is a community impact statement, together with a certain time limit where they choose amongst themselves, parse out the time and the points they'd like to make? Or will it be sets of time limits per neighborhood council? So those are the types of decisions or choices that we'll have to look into to land on this in the right way. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mr. O'Farrell, and you're absolutely correct. So what I'd like to do is have the general manager work with the city attorneys to, the city attorney's office to report back to this committee in 30 days. I'd like, kind of a menu of options, how this could work, and like I said, so 30 days, the clock is ticking. Okay, so without objection, I want to hold this item in committee and instruct the city attorney with your assistance to report back, like I said, within 30 days. So don't go anywhere. We have another item, but that'll be the order. What's the next item?
Item number 2 is motion Weston O'Farrell relative to the plan for a citywide system of neighborhood councils.
Okay, again, Mr. Spindler. And Mr. Bailey.
Okay, sounds good, except when you get to number 3, neighborhood councils should be allowed to provide funds to city departments. And then at the bottom, I further move that we're going to have gifts. Gifts. Neighborhood councils and Dunn granting authority to accept gifts. Here we go again. Money, 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 money. Here we go again. What does that have to do with presenting your position? They get money. In Encino, for example, the checking account is on lockdown. They can't even get the money out of there. So you give a certain amount of money every year to every neighborhood council. Now you're going to have a series where they start funneling the money back into the general fund through departmental issues under the guise of being provided for the benefit of the neighborhood. And then you want a MOU. Moo. Now, it doesn't stand for cows. It stands as a memorandum of understanding. So now you're involving neighborhood councils in MOUs. Why does a neighborhood council have to be involved with MOUs? They're supposed to be regular folks representing the community. But you're entangling cash, that's bribes, into the functionality of these 96 neighborhood councils. So what you're doing is you're putting the 96 of these departments as further extension and tentacles of the city's corrupt power. That's what you're doing. So I hope, number 3, no gifts and no money should be exchanging hands. I don't know if they're smart enough to see what this is, but I know what it is.
I'm glad you do. Mr. Bailey, could you come forward? Let's see if you know what this is. Yes, sir. Good to see you again.
Good morning. Glenn Bailey. And again, I was on one of the plan review committees, and we did discuss a number of recommendations. I told you Saturday morning I said 2 pages. Actually, it was 3 pages of recommendations, but I showed you a thick binder of all of our work.
Yes, you did.
And so those 3 pages are very, very important. I hope that you will look over those 3 pages and those various recommendations. The commission listed 3 priorities, but there are other very important issues there, and a couple of them are pending in this committee officially because of motions. But based on your motion, I want to just make a few comments on these. The first one, the first therefore be, move, is what I just said, which is all the recommendations. The second one regarding the rollover policy. So you may recall that in the past, we had the opportunity to roll over funds for up to 3 years and up to $100,000. That's when we had $50,000 a year in funding. I'm not suggesting that we go back to those days, but I would, and partly it's a question of keeping track of all that. I mean, it's over a period of time and the amount of money. However, I would say that if we had the opportunity to do, say, 1-year rollover with, say, $10,000 or some amount of money, even higher, but that would be easy to keep track. 1 year, a portion of the budget, because sometimes things happen with neighborhood councils and they can't spend all their money. And you can find out what that average amount is for those neighborhood councils who don't, and maybe put that in, so if they get their act together, then the next year they can do that. And sometimes there are projects, and I know you referenced that in the motion, projects where it's multiple neighborhood councils working together and they want to pool money, and it's because it's a big ticket item, and this would help facilitate that. Regarding the issue of donations and gifts, we could bring more money for the benefit of the city and its stakeholders if we bring back that previous authority that we had without a sunset clause, allow it to be a permanent opportunity. There have been projects where we could, and you have to be careful, there's no conflict of interest or anything about pending projects, but neighborhood councils could receive donations, and they have received in-kind donations, but it'd be great to receive monetary donations legally. Going through, it'd be in city accounts, so you'd have track of it.
Thanks, Glenn.
Okay,
Thank you.
and if I could ask if the neighborhood councils, as part of this 30-day report back, if neighborhood councils could be directed to participate in that process, or requested to participate in that input process, and the report back with city attorney and the general manager.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, let's defer to you, Ms. Lou. What are your thoughts? I mean, basically, where relates to the some amount for a rollover, what we're trying to do is minimize what I refer to as panic spending. They get towards the end of the year, and maybe they invest or spend money in areas that under normal circumstances they wouldn't, but because they want to spend this money in a specific period of time, they do that. So if we can, so my thoughts were, if there would be an amount, which we haven't exactly settled on yet, so that they would be able to carry that over. It would be more in line to what Mr. Bailey said, a one-year carryover. But if you could give us your thoughts on these suggestions.
In regards to the rollover amount, I think the department, in terms of our function in tracking that has been in the past an issue. With our existing staff, it was very difficult to track those funds when they were rolled over. So that would be my concern in terms of execution, administration on our side, that we would have the sufficient staffing to ensure that accurate tracking of those rollover funds could occur. And as Mr. Bailey pointed out, possibly, and your motion as well, in if the amount was somewhat smaller to prevent such panic spending, that would be more doable on our side. And I do have to say, too, that some of the panic spending that typically happens because of the impression that the monies will go back to the general fund and not be retained in the system. I think that nowadays, because neighbor councils are able to contribute to the Congress Planning Committee, they're able to contribute to budget advocates. There is a suggestion to also create an account for planning issues, like Plan Check NC, to create classes for neighbor councils in planning, that there are other options for neighbor councils to invest those funds as opposed to, buying reams of paper or frantically just spending all the way down.
Okay. Let me ask the CLA and the CAO, maybe if they would come forward, share their thoughts. We'll start off with the CAO's office.
Terry Sauer with the
It's working.
Sauer with the CAO. Mr. Chairman, we're happy to work with your office, the department, and the CLA on crafting a rollover policy. The policy has been suspended for the last 5 years. We concur with the department's assessment that tracking the funds has been difficult for the department. We think that there are opportunities for crafting a policy maybe along the lines of what's been discussed, and look forward to working with your office and the committee in coming back with something to you.
Well, we're excited about working with you as well. Paul?
Paul Smith, CLA. Mr. Chairman, we've been working on this issue for a number of years of how to deal with monies that are unspent during the annual allocation to the NCs. We did suspend it back a couple of years ago. The panic spending is an issue that we need to address. I think we did address it in some ways when we have allowed other methods for them to use their money, like the Congress and training sessions and other ways they can allocate money to other folks to accomplish their own needs and desires. I think we welcome the opportunity to work with the department, with the CAO, the advocates, to see if we can structure something that would satisfy the needs of prudent administration of funds and the opportunity to spend some of that money that they have not had the opportunity to have enough time or input to adequately evaluate a spending program, and so they could have an opportunity to spend some of that money in a subsequent fiscal year. So again, we welcome the opportunity to join in this endeavor.
And thank you, Paul. So different guidelines then would have to be put in place in order to, like you said, maybe put money where related to the planning or what, I mean, so right now, is that in place where they could, donate, or not donate, but give money to ensure that these other functions happen, or what do we have to do
Sure. So
to make that easier?
So for the Congress and the Budget Advocate, those separate accounts have been set up. I was going to work with Plan Check NC, which is the Neighborhood Council Alliance for Planning and Land Use Issues citywide, to see if how they wanted to proceed, if whether they wanted to set up an account for planning training for neighborhood councils, which is becoming more and more of an issue citywide. So that account has not been set up yet, but I'm hoping I will have some resolution on that this month and would bring something forward to City Council to go ahead and hopefully set up that account. The other options are also just to any unused funds would go towards outreach or capacity building in general, just a fund for that neighborhood councils could submit grant requests to, so that they can have that ability to access those funds again. As I mentioned before, I do think that some of the panic spending is the fact that they just fear it will just go, the unspent money will go into the general fund and not be reinvested back into the neighborhood council system.
Okay, then we need some kind of educational program. So anyway, so I look forward to our continued conversation about putting some of these things in place.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just the purpose of neighborhood councils is to empower others and not empower themselves. Having said that, I do think and believe very strongly there should be a greater sophistication out there in terms of zoning and planning knowledge, so that neighborhood councils can really function in a constructive manner on land use issues, and that will be very, very helpful. But I think that we'll have to toe a very careful line in terms of strict requirements for how that's done once money is allocated, and tie it directly with outreach, again, so that they're not separate. And I do think that we can figure out how to make sure that neighborhood councils can contribute to departments. For example, 3 neighborhood councils in a shared area might want to contribute to Bureau of Street Services for a mutual drought-tolerant median. And I think they should be able to do that, and that could pay for design work, and maybe they could receive donations from local businesses, and maybe the city council office could get involved. So I think those types of projects could really be good, and so I think a portion of funding could very well be freed up for projects and participation and collaboration like that. So I have no doubt on the rollover piece that that can be handled as well. And I think that the department has done really well in terms of managing funding for neighborhood councils with all the required transparency and oversight in recent years especially. So hats off to you on that one.
Thank you, Councilmember
Thank you.
Farrell.
And I want to thank Mr. O'Farrell for joining me in putting this motion forward. So I guess without objection, we'd like to, again, hold this in committee, but have you report back, I think, within the next few weeks on how to move forward in this area. So if that's fine with you, that will be, so let it be written, so let it be done, okay? Do we have any more business before this committee?
No, we don't.
And thank you. So this committee is adjourned. Thank everybody for getting up a little early and joining us today.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.